justice.
Welcome to Payne in Politics. It's another opportunity for us to get to know a little bit about some of our elected and selected officials in Southeast Texas. This is not, as I've always said, an endorsement of any particular candidate or any particular party. Today is no exception to that because we have with us both the Republican and Democratic Party chair of Southeast Texas. And I want to welcome both of you to Payne in Politics.
Thank you.
Let's just jump right in. Why don't you just give us a little bit of information about yourself and your job description.
I'm Judy Nichols, and I'm elected as the county party chair of Jefferson County. I do have a day job, but that's not really germane. My elected duties as our Ava's are to make sure that we properly conduct the Republican primary, and she does the Democrat primary election. Those are statutory duties, and we are countywide elected officials.
Okay. Now, Ava, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what makes you qualify for this position?
Well, I'm Ava Graves. I am the wife of a United Methodist pastor. I'm a hospice chaplain by profession. I was elected to this position in October when our previous chair, Kate Bernstein, stepped down after a distinguished time of service. What qualifies me for this job, first of all, is my willingness to serve. I was a precinct chair before I became party chair. So understanding the nuances that go along with this responsibility, as Judy was speaking of, we're responsible for making sure we sign the contracts for the voting apparatus, testing the equipment, which we recently did together, as well as making sure all of the candidates are solidified and placed on the Secretary of State website.
You mentioned something earlier, Ava, about precinct chairs. Do you guys have, the Republican Party have precinct chairs? If so, how many, or are they the same?
We're structured the same by statute, and precinct chairs are elected on the ballot. If they're unopposed, you'll find a notice outside each polling location of the precinct chairs that you'll be voting for by in absentia, I guess, because they're just elected as nominated if they're unopposed. And then if you find a precinct chair that's opposed, both names will be on the ballot if you live in their voting precinct.
Well, Ava, you said you've served as a precinct chair. Tell me a little bit about the difference between your job as party chair versus precinct chair.
Well, as a precinct chair, I'm accountable to my particular precinct or available to my particular precinct with the hopes of synergizing the community to get out the vote. As Judy mentioned, each precinct is unique, so you find a way to connect in a way that's meaningful for that particular precinct. And what's different as a county chair, you're responsible for all of those precincts and helping get those positions filled.
Now, how long have you served as county chair for the Republican Party?
This is my first term as well. My first term of 2 years will end this June.
I was getting ready to ask, it's a 2-year commitment.
It's a 2-year commitment.
And is it a paid commitment?
Yeah, it's a full-time, no-paying job, I like to say.
A whopping big zero, right?
Well, I think we get $300 for running the elections, I believe.
Oh, yay! New shoes,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that was new. I wanted to make sure you knew that. But I generally turn that
Yes.
income over to the party as a donation
Sure.
anyway because it's
needed.
Yeah, and it's not significant. You know, it's just at least the state acknowledges that there is a lot of work that goes into being a party chair.
And as a party chair, do you automatically become a delegate for the convention?
You have to participate, to my knowledge, in the precinct committee to get named as a delegate to the county convention. Then you participate in the county convention and get named as a delegate to the state convention, and in Texas, the Republicans run for the or the national convention. I assume that's the same thing. It's a very competitive election by congressional district? Senate district.
I think it's congressional.
Could be. I believe it's by congressional district. So all the counties or precincts that our Randy Weber serves will be competing for 6 slots, 3 delegates and 3 alternates.
Okay, well, let me ask, because you told me this is about a full-time job. You actually have a job outside of party chair. What do you guys do for fun outside of just running the party?
Well, I love spending time with my husband.
Okay.
We have a host of nieces and nephews and godchildren and other people's children that we enjoy going to their events, whether it's football, cheerleading, soccer. I enjoy being at home. I love having coffee and thumbing through my magazines. I like quiet time. I like people watching. Any place that there's folks. When I go to events, it's not generally about the event. It's about watching the crowd and, seeing how people interact.
Okay, and what about you, Judy?
I'm an avid gardener. I like to cook. I like to travel. I'm very physically active. I like whitewater rafting and slow water rafting. The Guadalupe is one of my favorite places to visit in the Blanco. Surfing. Just since I became chair, I don't seem to do as much of it as I did before I got elected to chair.
We've talked a little bit about the position of being a countywide party chair. Really kind of want to shift to your purpose. Tell me a little bit about what you think kind of the purpose of your job as a county chair is.
I think the purpose of the county chair is to make sure that the party is synergized, that there are opportunities for people to learn about the Democratic Party, that we are doing things in the community that empower new leadership, looking out to the community and seeking those who are serving in various capacities and finding out what their interests are in the future as it relates to serving their city. The Jefferson County chair is not just for the Democratic Party. We're Jefferson County, and so creating opportunities to be able to reach across the aisle and collaborate on things. I think one of the most beautiful experiences I saw during Harvey was the collective effort between the Democratic headquarters and the Republican Party in making sure our citizens were cared for.
Well, Judy, you mentioned earlier that there are sometimes areas where the Republican Party in Jefferson County may be a little bit different than what the Republican Party might see in another county or in another state or across the country. How do you deal with, as a party chair, when you have issues that are affecting Jefferson County that might be a little different than the national platform? How do you handle that?
Well, like Ava said, one of our number one responsibilities is to engage and empower voters. So you have to trust the will of the voter, and you have to make sure you provide clear and concise communication. I have great faith in election results that competition almost always produces a better result. So that's one of the nice things about having competing ideologies is the two parties can compete against one another and generate a competitive atmosphere that gives the citizens of Jefferson County the best leadership.
One of my strengths is bringing people together. As a hospice chaplain, I am with people in the most vulnerable times of their lives, and when you're dealing with end-of-the-life issues with families, it brings out the best in the worst of us and the worst in the best of us. So being able to bridge that energy that causes conflict in those times, that's one of the gifts that I have, and that's one of the gifts that I bring with me in my leadership style.
Well, you mentioned something too, Judy, about sometimes you don't necessarily agree with all the platform. For people, and I've heard a lot of folks say, well, I really support this issue, but not that issue. As a party chair, what do you do when you encounter those kind of individuals?
Well, I like Ava, am quite skilled in conflict resolution, but if you're proactive, you can diffuse a lot of potential conflicts as well. I'm sure Ava did this going into a contested primary. I counsel both candidates, or all three candidates, or all five candidates. When this is over, we have to pull together and be supportive of who prevails and recognize that if you didn't campaign well enough. It's all about the strengths of your arguments and look inward as to why you didn't prevail, not outward. If it's a fair process, you just can use a loss as a learning opportunity and how you can improve going forward better. Politics is a process. That's why they call it the political process. And if you don't prevail this time, doesn't necessarily mean you weren't right. It just means maybe you weren't quite persuasive enough.
How do you address voter turnout in your precinct or in the Republican Party, maybe in a way that may be a little different than the Democratic Party?
I don't know about different. Voter engagement is going to be huge to both of us. One of the things that we do with candidates is, and both parties, is we walk with them and go door to door and meet neighbors and meet voters, and we know who the voters are that don't come out. We have that data. We know who the voters are that come out all the time. And I might have a message at a voter's door that comes out all the time that would be like, hey, how would you like to get involved? I see that you've never missed an election. I know that you're always voting. Would you like to get involved in the party? I don't happen to have a precinct chair in this precinct, which means your precinct isn't represented at the county party level. Nobody hears from your precinct because there's no representation. I might engage that person, or somebody who's never voted but been registered 20 years. Hey, what do you think we could do to help you? Would it help you if we sent you a text message or an email or a phone call? Or would it help you if we reminded you? Are you 90 years old? Do you need help getting to the polls? Those are things that you identify as you interact with voters everywhere, not just block walking and knocking on doors.
How do you manage the fact that there might be an area in town where you either have a lot of support or very little?
As far as getting out the vote? Or,
yes.
Well, everybody needs to be registered to vote. Period. Bottom line. One of our first events of the year at the Democratic headquarters was to have the deputy voters training registered class, and it was standing room only. It was a huge event. So that was a way of empowering the community and then sending folks out into areas. We were at a Super Bowl party recently and made an announcement that the deadline for registering to vote for the primary was at hand, and was there anyone there who needed to register to vote? And there were several people there, and we had several folks that whipped out their book, and we got folks registered. Or at the grocery store, we're always looking for an opportunity and encouraging everyone. Ask people, are you registered to vote? Just at the grocery store when you're checking out, and there's someone, whoever it is, whether young or old or whatever. Have you registered to vote?
What I'm hearing is voter registration is important. Party line, everyone wants to make sure we have people registered to vote.
Absolutely.
We have a lot of college students coming into Southeast Texas. How are you dealing with these college students that come into Southeast Texas?
Well, we actually have some clubs on campus, and as does the other party. This year, for the first time in history, we're excited to have a polling location in the Montaigne Center at the Lamar Cardinal Club. So
let me stop there. So this year, we'll get a
year.
chance to have the college students vote actually on campus.
Absolutely.
That's
awesome.
They will just have to cross the bridge to the Montaigne Center. And that's the first time in my understanding that we've had a polling location at Lamar University. And I think that's election day only. We have 11 early voting locations throughout the county and 38 election day locations. So if they want to vote early, they can go to any of the early voting locations, because we do have countywide voting now, which is not brand new, but it is relatively new. And some people who may not have engaged recently may not understand they can vote anywhere now in Jefferson County, which has been a really nice convenience to increase that voter turnout and that participation.
I really kind of want to shift again. We've heard a lot about the purpose of your position. I really want to kind of talk about your power. Do you guys have budgets that you operate under?
Hopefully.
Okay.
If we do it right.
We didn't
Occasionally.
we didn't talk about this in purpose, but one of the obvious purposes of your job is to raise money for the party.
Absolutely.
It doesn't have to be. There are parties in the state of Texas that don't raise any money at all. I took over the party with $300 in the operating account. There's not a lot of party expenses you have to expend that aren't reimbursed through the state. But there's a lot of stuff you want to do. You know, you want to print information about your candidates as a slate. Each candidate produces their own print information, but you want to be able to have all your slate in one place. That's an expense. You may want to do social media. You may want to give candidates donations and support them financially after the primary. There's a lot of things you want to do.
There's also your operating budget, you know, for the facility that you are.
If you have a
If you have a headquarters.
Well, I'm hearing a lot about the expense. Where do I get the revenue?
Well, that's where the fundraising comes in. I know when Cade was in office, he raised $250,000 during what we called our Blue Wave campaign. And so just inviting people locally, statewide, and nationally to participate in that process. Jefferson County turns out really well when we're in the fundraising mode, and so that's what we do. We reach out, and Act Blue is another resource of folks. We have folks that donate monthly through Act Blue that helps support our overhead.
And do you have to report your income to the state level or to the
just
nation?
like a candidate, we have reporting requirements. We have many of the same things. We call ours the Grassroots Club, where members of the party just donate on a continual giving basis. We're having our upcoming Trump-Reagan dinner in March, and that's going to be headlined by a national figure that people can buy tickets and tables to, and that's well supported by the community. There's just anything we can think of to generate funds. There's always a good use for them. Everything from supporting the physical operations of the headquarters, all the way to supporting the candidates.
When we start talking about supporting candidates, sometimes we have people that come from outside of our community trying to use some of our resources. Is that something that you have to balance as a party chair as to how much we're going to use for Jefferson County candidates versus how much we're going to use for candidates outside of Jefferson County?
They're never truly outside of Jefferson County. They just may have a district or precinct or service area that's larger than Jefferson County. For example, the Chief Justice of the Ninth Court of Appeals is running right now, and it's a very hotly contested primary with 5 candidates. That's 10 counties. It's huge. And then we've got a JP or a constable. He's only got a small part of the county. So you have to allocate resources in a way that's fair and reasonable. And resources aren't just money. They're time, energy, wisdom, thought. You want to try as a party chair and not favor anybody, even though, of course, we have our right to free speech and we get, we're human, we can pick favorites, but it generally doesn't serve anybody very well if you're overt about your personal preferences.
For the first time this time in the state of Texas, we're not going to have straight party ticket voting. Can you kind of tell us what impact you believe that's going to have on the Democratic Party?
Well, it's certainly an opportunity for us to educate our voters on who the candidates are. There's that saying, one and done voting. But now is an opportunity. We have to strategically and intentionally make sure that everyone understands who our candidates are and how they're placed on the ballot. So I think that's a daunting task, but we are up to the challenge. We're working diligently to make sure our community knows through our precinct chairs. That's one huge resource, of course, with social media and other forms of media, getting that message out.
And we're hoping, obviously, with Payne in Politics, we're going to help try to facilitate
Absolutely.
explaining the jobs. But for instance, you might vote for the president and vice president and not necessarily turn the page and go down ballot. And that has an impact on us locally, does it not?
It does it every single election, and I think we haven't even really talked about it, but one of our number one responsibilities, both of us, is making sure that's not just a name on a ballot, that there's a face behind it, and that our community and constituency knows the policies and the platform and understand what those names on the ballot stand for. And you're not just going in there going, well, I like her because she's a girl and the other guy's a guy, or vice versa. It's like, oh, I've talked to her. I've seen her videos on Facebook or Instagram. I've read literature from her. I saw her at the debate. So you're actually making an informed, educated decision. And that, I think, encourages people to go down ballot more than anything else. When I was just a voter and not politically involved, I would skip races sometimes because I didn't want to make a bad decision. And that's a very normal human reaction. So one of our biggest jobs is to make sure that our candidates are not just a name on a ballot.
Well, let me ask you, because there are times when I see races that they're not contested. There's no opposition of either party. What do you say to a voter like me who sees that ballot and say, do I still cast a ballot when I know they're going to win?
I say yes, you still vote. You still always vote.
Always vote.
Always
Okay.
vote.
Well, nothing gets you more response from an elected official says, I voted for you, and I'd like to have this conversation with you about this issue that your office addresses.
Well, I think you raised something, because after the voting is complete, you guys go back and study whether or not people have voted in a particular race. You may not know who they voted for, but you know whether or not they voted. Do you believe that has an impact on the leaders or the elected leaders? Do they get that same information?
That's kind
Yeah.
of like their paycheck. I mean,
That's it.
that's their boss. That's the one thing we can never lose sight of. Every time you cast a vote, you're stepping up to be the boss. That's your responsibility and duty as a citizen and a voter, is to take that responsibility seriously. And everybody looks at election results. I don't care if you're the dog catcher on the ballot. You want to know what those election results are. And it just adds a level of accountability for our elected officials, I think, that make them better servants of the people.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate you both for being here, having Judy Nichols, Republican chair, as for the chair of the Republican Party, as well as Ava Graves, the chair of the Democratic Party of Jefferson County. I appreciate you being a part of Payne in Politics. Certainly we want to educate and continue to educate Southeast Texas, and look forward to having your continued leadership.
Well, I want to say, James, thank you for doing this. I remember when you did the Get Out the Vote, each one, reach one, get 7 people. I thought that was so successful and just such a grassroots effort. So you are greatly appreciated in the community.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Your time and energies in getting a more engaged, active citizenry will always yield fruit.
Thank you for being here.